Thank you, President. It's a pleasure to stand and speak to this motion of wildlife rescue reform and follow on from Ms Watt and many of her comments. I'm fortunate to represent the region of Eastern Victoria with its spectacular natural beauty, but spectacular natural places, and within those, of course, is the natural wildlife. And whether it's the Mornington Peninsula, Phillip Island, of course, famously known with its little penguins, South Gippsland, the Strzelecki's, Wilson's Promontory, up into the Dandenongs, west and central Gippsland going up into the mountains, and of course East Gippsland from the lakes, going all the way up to the New South Wales border with some incredible remote wilderness into the mountains. There's such an incredible abundance of wildlife, but also a diversity of wildlife across all those regions that are all spectacular. It's why so many people choose to live across the region in the different areas, because of that natural environment, and of course our wildlife that live within that spectacular natural environment. And people living in those regions for different reasons will come across wildlife that are in trouble. Obviously we see seasonal changes, particularly in drought, where animals that perhaps otherwise would be staying within a particular area or on the move, looking for food or water, or otherwise we have situations, of course, that we saw in particularly 1920, where we have natural disasters where mass migration of wildlife is occurring to escape either fire, floods, wind events we've seen recently. And it's an incredible thing that we have volunteer networks that are prepared to come together and support our wildlife in the times that they need help most. And I think it's not just that, but I also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge groups such as our land care groups, our farmers that are working to not only protect habitat but enable more habitat, weed management, making sure that no matter what animal it is, have that habitat to live. We think so much of birds, the plantations that farmers are putting in that assist their livestock, that assist their farm in general, but are also such wonderful places, particularly for small birds. We know that they need that sort of condensed bush space so they can get in and breed and be safe from larger birds. And I think, as Ms Watt or Ms Terpstra said about the introduced species, that will often give some of our wonderful native bird life a pretty hard time. So I want to acknowledge the work that our farmers do and our residents in our local community of regional towns. I was out with Minister Dimopoulos actually just in Merbau North and Arrawatta just a few days before the storm event came through, and being out looking at the work farmers are doing to put in pastures, multi-variety pastures, up to 12 different seeds in, that these types particularly aren't requiring herbicides or pesticides. Seeing lots of animal life within that, which is encouraging birds and other things. But then, of course, as I said before, the plantations, which become corridors that Ms Cora spoke about coming off Tower Hill in her region. Once those corridors are in place, you're enabling animal movement to get between the bigger areas that they can live in, and you're enabling that movement either in times of emergency, but you're also enabling that movement for breeding and crossing, and ensuring that there's as many species of animal in a place as possible, whether that's to enable that biodiversity to allow them to, whether that's those animals working well off each other, being in a similar area. So I just wanted to pick up specifically on the wildlife rescuers themselves. The rescue and rehabilitation is very rewarding. It's not only rewarding for our volunteers, but it's critically important for our injured wildlife. But it is and can be physically and emotionally demanding, and it does require a range of skills. To safely capture and handle distressed wildlife is something that does require a lot of skill, because particularly some of our bigger wildlife, it could put people, good Samaritans, trying to do the right thing and trying to help out, it could put them in danger's way and harm's way. And of course, administering first aid and where necessary, euthanasia, because we don't want animals being in intense pain and discomfort where there's no other opportunity. And of course, providing appropriate food and enclosures. And we need to do this in a way that doesn't stress animals, that doesn't, it maintains their natural behaviours on you growing up on the farm. If we, supporting lambs, just got to be mindful of the way that you're handling them, so that the ewes will take the lambs back as their own and not reject them. So of course, across all wildlife, we've got to be mindful to do the same thing. In Victoria, a sick, injured or orphan wildlife can only be rehabilitated by a wildlife shelter operator or a foster carer who is authorised under Section 28A of the Wildlife Act 1975. Wildlife shelters operators and foster carers are collectively known as wildlife rehabilitators, and wildlife rehabilitators are authorised to acquire, receive, possess and euthanize and dispose of wildlife for the purposes of the care, treatment and rehabilitation of sick, injured or orphan wildlife for release back to the wild. And the dedication and commitment to Victoria's native wildlife is highly valued by this side and, of course, our community, because as I said before, it's an incredible thing that they do, and at time it's taking up not only a lot of their time and goodwill, but also can put them in harm's way. Victoria's wildlife and environment volunteers and volunteer groups have enriched our natural environment, and yeah, it's very hard to measure the impact of their work. It's phenomenal. Victoria has a strong history of environmental volunteering, with volunteers contributing enormously to improving our environment, our local communities and our economy. And of course, I spoke before about Landcare and the incredible work they do, but there's so many other groups. This government has worked with all environmental volunteers, volunteer groups, the community and government agencies to explore how to maintain, support and grow the volunteering sector. And we'll continue to listen and to support those groups in every which way that we can, and recognise that these challenges in supporting the work that volunteers are doing and enhancing volunteer environmental volunteering through the coordination of those volunteers' work. Supporting, improving and expanding the environmental volunteering sector in Victoria will contribute directly to the vision and goals of Biodiversity 2037. In 2017, we released Biodiversity 2037. It was our ambitious 20-year plan to halt the decline of our biodiversity and improve outcomes for our precious threatened species. Since we came to government in 2014, we've invested over $582 million into biodiversity, which I think is critically important. A number of my colleagues have raised the bigger challenge of climate change, and we know that the impacts of climate change are going to affect our wildlife as a different climate is moving in on our animals. So I think this investment is absolutely critical to ensure that our wildlife have the best opportunity. When we talk about that biodiversity holistically, the holistic collection of our wildlife have the best opportunity to thrive that is possible. And this is the largest investment in environment and biodiversity by a Victorian government ever. So I'd just like to thank you, President, for the opportunity to speak on this motion?